But there's a new contract. I just wanted to get the lease.
Good morning.
Had agreed with that.
Good morning.
The landlord has a responsibility.
Keep the gavel.
That's right.
Get down
We'll go ahead and call a committee meeting to order.
Yeah, I think the resolution.
My pen is missing. Back up. I was watching the clock up there, and Katrina advised me it's actually a couple minutes behind, so we were ready to go. Well, welcome to the June meeting of the Facilities and Infrastructure Committee. We've got a full committee here this morning: Randy Brown, John Hunt, Judith Hubbard, Dan Wakeman, and myself. Quite a few things on the agenda, resolutions that we'll be going over, as well as a couple of presentations. Are there any changes to the agenda? None noted. Is there any public comment? Looks like everybody here is part of the business of the day. We have the minutes from May 21st were circulated. Were there any additions, corrections, questions? How about a motion? Moved by Judith, second by Dan to approve the minutes. Any discussion? All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Chair's report, nothing noteworthy today. I did appreciate Corsa taking the presentation on the Center of Government building to the full legislature the other night, and good discussion, good opportunity there to ask a few questions. And I know one of the areas that we've been paying attention to is with the geothermal, and we're going to have a presentation on that, district ideas, later on in the meeting here this morning. Do we have a county administrator's report?
We don't have any large report, so we will wait for the presentation of geothermal and then discuss it. But besides that, no other additional report. And we can also speak to the resolution on renewal of the lease for the DMV facility that is, I believe, on the agenda. So we had issues come up, and we can address that as well.
Oh, that's the very next item, so why don't we get that on the floor? The resolution under 6A, renewal of Tompkins County Department of Motor Vehicles lease, ID number 14159. Moved by Randy, second by Dan. And
yeah, so thank you for bringing that up, because we were not aware of any issues at the Department of Motor Vehicles, but in fact there is a issue with the roof. Apparently it has been there for some time. So I've reached out to Rachel Graham, and I've also sent the message over to Arel. We've not had an opportunity to have a conversation about next steps for that, but it is an issue.
are you recommending we go ahead with the lease and have that conversation?
We would probably not move. I mean, you can approve us moving forward with a contingency that because we would probably not move forward with it. Well, we wouldn't move forward with it until we address this. So it's up to you if you want to pull the resolution until next month, and we can come back and give you a report on what we find, or you can approve this with the understanding that we're not going to move forward until we get this resolved.
Okay, 1 month is fine, no time constraints.
I don't think I think it's the end of year, although, you know, I'm not.
It looked like it was the end of the year. And
Yeah, I think it's the end of the year, so we should be able to wait for next month, and then be able to come back with some further information on that. I'm sorry, it was breaking news on Tuesday evening, and I haven't had an opportunity to follow up on it yet.
The resolution says that the lease agreement expired on April 30th, and so it already expired, last month.
So we're in a month-to-month at this point.
Is there a risk that, no, that's, okay. I mean, I'm fine with, I think it's probably better to wait a month and make sure that the terms are actually settled before approving something, if it doesn't interfere with any other operations.
Yeah, we usually, most of some of these leases, if it expires, it goes from month to month. I think one of the reasons why it delayed was, I believe there was process to sell off the building to new owners, and that is what caused this. So we're happy to wait a month and resolve it and make sure you get the full details of what is happening in terms of the roof.
Katrina, would that take a motion to postpone or just remove it?
You could just withdraw the motions to put it on the floor, and we can defer it for a month.
Okay, and Randy's got a question.
Yeah, any risk if the lease did expire that we're going to be okay for the period of time? Okay. Also, when you provide that to us, could you give us background on the lease? I mean, I don't see anything on the numbers. So if you let us know what that lease cost, just so I realize there's no cost going up, which is great.
Yeah.
But just to know what that number is would be great.
Thank you, I will do.
And I like the spot where it's at, so.
Would the mover and seconder like to remove that, withdraw?
Fine here.
Okay.
I'm good. Yep.
Very good. Thank you. John, thanks for bringing the question forward the other night. It sounds as though that was a good opportunity to make sure we had our...
Long-term memory is better than my short-term.
But before we leave entirely here, that's 5-year lease, is that typical?
It is typical. We've been there for 18 years.
Okay.
So it's pretty typical. Yeah, we just did the workforce development resolution that gives us a 7-year lease, so it's typical.
Okay. With the consent of the committee, we'll withdraw that and return to it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Norm. Courtney, you've got a few resolutions I understand you're going to present us with here. We're at a point in time with transportation that a number of the federal contracts have come forward and time to make adjustments. Good morning, Courtney.
Good morning. Thank you so much.
Do you want to give an overview of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 that are before us? Are they more or less a group to be considered?
Yeah, there's 3 kind of groups. The first 3 are all for 5311, which is rural funding. The next 3 are all 5307, which is for urban funding. And then the last one is for our coordinated plan.
Okay, why don't we take them, and if there's anything to point out as we bring each resolution forward, I'll have you comment.
Okay, great.
Resolution authorizing New York State Department of Transportation Section 5311 transfer to Federal Transit Administration Section 5307 grant 5475 2026-1 application for Tompkins County, ID number 14150. Is there a motion? Dan, second by John.
Great. This one, I just want to comment. This is the 3rd time that this resolution has come to the legislature. Nothing has really changed since the first time. It's just kind of different steps in this process. As you see, it's 5311 transfer to 5307. The way that this process works for rural funding is that it starts at the federal level. They have a pool for all rural entities. Then it gets passed down to the state. So then New York State could actually decide who they give it to. We applied for this funding from the state. I'm happy to say we were awarded everything that we applied for. But then because we also get urban funding, it then gets passed back to the federal government before we can draw it down. So basically the only thing this resolution is saying is that you all are allowing it to go back to the federal government so that we can now draw it down. And then the first one is for the county projects.
Okay, the total of the grants $1 million, federal share $650,000, state $50,000, and local $300,000. Judith.
And
I think there's an error. I think that the state and local were switched on the total, and also that in the subtotal, it's labeled local, but maybe that should be state. When I add up the different components, at least that's what I get to.
you would be correct.
In which case, the local share is only 50,000, which makes this a lot easier.
Correct. The local share is 50,000, and $0 of that 50,000 is actually coming from Tompkins County. All of these projects are RFP'd out, and so for mobility management and for our rides recovery and first mile, last mile, which don't have a local share, the mobility management local share is coming from the organization that is contracted with.
Okay, so
Go ahead.
we need an amendment to this as it's written then. This is on page 15 of the packet, lines 12 and 13. Essentially, we're changing the word state to local and the word local to state on those two lines.
And on line 7, the word local should be changed to state.
That's state, okay. Is that all right, Courtney?
Yes, I'm so sorry. Thank you for catching that.
She's good with spreadsheets.
A lot of
I think
numbers.
Katrina's going to tell
I
us.
can go ahead and correct them. They're just a manifest error.
Okay.
Go ahead. So we'll get it taken care of.
Further questions on, thanks for pointing that out, Judith.
Yes.
Further questions on this resolution, Judith?
I'm just so delighted by how much assistance we can provide and services we can provide to the county without it actually coming in out of taxpayer dollars. I mean, local taxpayer dollars. I think it's fabulous, and I really appreciate the team that's making that happen.
Are we ready to vote? All in favor? Are there any opposed? Carried. Thank you. Next resolution, under 7B, authorizing New York State Department of Transportation, excuse me, section 5311 transfer to Federal Transit Administration, section 5307 grant 5475 2026-2, application for Tompkins Consolidated Area Transit ID number 14151. Motion by John, second by Dan.
This is the exact same as the last one, but it's for TCAT projects. Again, the local match here is going to come from TCAT, not the county. And then just quick, the Appalachian Development Public Transit Assistance, that's operating funds that they can use anything for operating because we fall in the area that gets those funds every year.
And the grant is a total of $4,878,000, or the resolution is $4,878,060. The bulk from federal and state, local share $390. Any questions? Are we ready to vote? All in favor? Any opposed? And that motion carries. Good morning. Resolution C, authorizing grant 4575 2026-3, application for Gadabout, ID number 14152. Dan, this moves, and Judith seconds.
Third one, that's exactly the same, but this one's for Gadabout. Local share, again, is going to come from Gadabout, purchase of 6 buses, and operating funds.
Dan?
Just a question about the set of these here. Several of these are transfers, several of these are grant applications. Is that right here?
Yeah, that's just how they're all this one is a transfer too. I think the error maybe came from Gadabout. I couldn't, minute track has a set number of letters and words you can put in the title, and Gadabout is longer than TCAT, so I had to cut down the title so that it could fit.
So
but it's the exact same thing.
This is really a transfer.
Correct, yes.
Other questions? Judith?
With 6 new vehicles for Gadabout, does that increase our capacity, or is it matched by retiring vehicles?
So these we all applied for as replacement vehicles. So as they come on the road, 6 other ones will come off the road.
And what happens to the ones that come off the road?
So they should all have met their useful life expectancy. They can then be put out to bid or auctioned off or sold. If they sell for less than $10,000, Gadabout can keep that money for operating another transportation expenses. If it's sold for over that, they have to give 80% of over that back to the federal government. But the buses they're going to take off the road are like 15 years old, and they're not going to go over that ever.
Out of a point of curiosity, does that mean if it sells for like $12,000, you get less money than if it sells for $9,000? Because if it's $12,000,
So I believe the first $10,000 they get to keep,
Okay.
and then after that, 80% of
that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
Do they have do they carry a fund balance at Gadabout and so on and apply those funds, or does that end up getting adjusted and coming back into the general fund?
That's a question I don't think I'm equipped to answer. I'm so sorry.
No, just out of curiosity.
Here comes Frank.
Good morning, Frank.
Good morning. So what happens is, what they've been doing usually is putting it on an auction site. Once they recoup that money, they use that money usually in that current fiscal year or put it into fund balance and then use it for future years. It depends on where they are at what moment and what their expenses are versus what their revenues are that come in.
Sounds like an opportunity.
Absolutely.
Any further questions? If not, all in favor? Are there any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Moving right along. D, authorizing grant 5475 2026-4, Federal Transit Administration, Section 5307, Urban Formula Grant Application for Tompkins Consolidated Area Transit, ID number 14153. Moved by Dan, second by Judith.
Okay, now we're on our second group of applications. These ones are new funds that haven't come to the legislature yet. This is 5307, which is for urban areas. So again, we get both urban and rural as a county with both. I am anticipating Randy's questions about last year versus this year, so I can tell you in 2025, we got a total of $4.68 million. This year, we got a total of $4.9 million, which is spread out between the next three resolutions. Last year, TCAT took about $3.2 million, and this year we have 3.76 of the federal line coming to TCAT. We, as Ithaca, are known as what they call a STIC. It's a small transit-intensive city. So some of these funds are coming to that. So a big shout out to TCAT here for increasing riderships and miles, and that's kind of helped us go up from our number last year. TCAT wanted to use all of this money for operating funds. We all sat down, kind of talked about the total funds and split it up between TCAT, Gadabout, and the county. And this was TCAT's request.
Thanks for the explanation, Courtney. It's a total grant of $7,521,458, split between federal and state with no local share. And it's good to hear that the ridership has helped with that formula. Real good to hear.
Yeah.
Any questions? Shall we vote? All in favor? Are there any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Under E, we've got resolution authorizing 5474 2026-5 Federal Transit Administration Section 5307 Urban Formula Program Grant Application for Gadabout. And it's ID number 14154. And moved by Dan, second by Judith.
Same thing as the last one, but for Gadabout. Last year, Gadabout took took $700,000 of this funds. This year, they're up to $750,000. Gadabout also requested to use all of it for operating, which makes it simple here as well.
So 700 times 2, so it was 1.4 has gone to 1.5.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Good to hear.
Good increase.
Further questions? Are we ready? All in favor? Any opposed? And the motion carries. Under F, authorizing grant 5475-2026-6, Federal Transit Administration, Section 5307, Urban Formula Program Grant Application for Tompkins County. And this is ID number 14155, moved by Dan, second by Judith.
Same thing again, urban funds being used for the county. This one, last year, the county took $725,000. This year, we went down to $400,000. Some reasons for that, we had applied through the 5311 to get mobility management included in there, which we were awarded by the state, and so we didn't need to include that in the federal side. And then we have some old grants that we're still pulling down, so we're able to kind of go down to $400,000 this year and give that other funds to TCAT and Gadabout. This one is a little bit confusing because it's under project administration, which is similar. It's salaries, computers, day-to-day things. For some reason, for the county, it's considered capital costs instead of operating costs, which breaks it down as an 80% federal, 10% state, and 10% local. And this one, this $50,000 local, is the only county cost I will bring to you today of all of these resolutions.
Questions?
Yes. Maybe Norma can highlight why these are considered capital and not operating.
What's that?
Or Frank.
Oh, Frank. Yeah, Frank's coming. I'm sorry, I was
No, that's okay.
still dealing with the roof issue.
So the state, the feds in the state, for whatever reason, consider mobility management and project administration as capital projects.
Okay.
Simplest answers of them all. So it's an 80-10-10 split.
Judith?
You said that this dollar amount is lower than last year, and this is the only one that comes with a local component. Does that mean that the local share is actually going down relative to last year?
So no, because we're using when you see our budget, when it comes through budget, you'll see it all broken down. It's not going down, we're just using other grant sources, old grants, to make sure that project administration and mobility management are covered so that there won't be an increase. But I wouldn't say it would be a decrease at this point.
Okay.
Can I jump in on just that one? Is because the mobility management essentially got switched from 5307 to 5311, but both ways the contracted organization is paying the local match, whether it was in 5307 or 5311.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll jump in. So this is down this year. Will it go back up next year, and is that accounted for?
Next year,
Or is it just moved permanently?
it's not permanent.
Okay.
If you're talking about 2027, we're going to pull old grants to make up the difference of the $300 and some $1,000. For 2028, I won't know that until the appropriation comes out and we see what we've drawn down and what we can do.
Thank you.
Any further questions? If not, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And finally, a resolution to adopting Tompkins County Transportation Coordinated Plan 2026 to 2029, ID number 14167. Is there a motion? Randy, second Judith. And I'm assuming this brings them all together.
Kind of, yes. This one I'll try and be brief, and I have a few things I kind of want to go through. The coordinated plan is a requirement every 3 years from the FTA and the state for anyone who gets funds. As you just saw, we got a variety of different funding streams, which makes this a requirement. This is basically saying that we need to have a plan every 3 years to ensure that seniors, people with disabilities, and low-income individuals are accounted for and really thought about when we're planning our transportation, and that they have access to transportation across the county. The kind of technical audience for this report is the FTA or DOT. When we apply for new projects and new funds, they're going to check projects just to make sure that they kind of fit into the goals that we have in the coordinated plan. But I also think it's important to say that this coordinated plan is also kind of a commitment to our community, that we're working towards a future with reliable, affordable, and accessible transportation for all members of our community, all residents of our county. Throughout this process, I had input from about 75 people throughout different human service organizations, local government, Tompkins County residents, to provide their input on feedback on barriers and solutions. I wrote up a draft of this plan. I ended up getting 25 responses of kind of feedback and revisions and things that people wanted to see, which I'm very excited about. So the final draft of the plan really does have feedback from people from across the county. The biggest things that the plan includes is barriers and solutions. Some of the barriers include education and knowledge gap. One thing I want to point out, we did a poll of service providers, and service providers ranked their own knowledge of transportation resources about 20% higher than that of their clients that are coming in. Out-of-county transportation for people with disabilities is huge. Gadabout can get people around in the county, but as soon as they need to kind of cross county lines, especially for people with mobility devices, it gets really difficult. And then also a big barrier that comes up is anything outside of 9 to 5 hours. People that work night shifts, people that need to bring their kids to childcare really early in the morning, that tends to be a huge barrier. So a few of the solutions that are included in the plan, first kind of goes back to this education and knowledge gap. How can we really distribute our resources? How do we trickle out this kind of knowledge if the providers have it but their clients don't? How do we bridge that gap, especially if providers aren't working in transportation but are, you know, really trying to get people access to food or housing, and it's not the #1 thing on their mind? What can we give them to make it as easy as possible that they can just give a packet to their clients, or they can kind of direct them to somebody to sign them up to get them access to transportation resources? I've been working on this already with Cayuga Medical. I've been working with their HR department to get resources given out to all new employees during employee orientation. I think it's been pretty successful. I've been getting a few calls from new Cayuga Med employees who don't have a way to get to work. So hopefully expanding that. The second thing is, if we can't get people to services, can we get services to people? And whether that's, you know, bringing mobile services to libraries, community centers, directing people to telehealth appointments. That's obviously outside of my purview as the transportation. And so that really brings in kind of how many people have been involved in this plan. And it really does take teamwork. I think I'm really proud of the network that we've created and the commitment from the community for all of these different solutions. To which I humbly ask you all to kind of make the county commitment here by adopting the plan. And then I have one tiny little thing, is that there's one typo on page 3. I wrote the coordinated plan so many times in this document that when I was writing about the comprehensive plan, I accidentally called it the coordinated plan. I've fixed it in the published version, but I don't know if you all, what you want to do to make sure that you all are voting on the typo-less version.
So coordinated becomes consolidated?
Comprehensive. In the list on page 3, number 5 at the bottom, it says Tompkins County Coordinated Plan 2015. Okay. It should say Tompkins County Comprehensive Plan 2015.
We'll note the change.
Great, thank you.
I just would note here, it's a 35-page plan, and it's very comprehensive.
Thank you.
Randy.
Go ahead, Juice.
I'm just looking through the plan. I have to say there's a lot of really interesting stuff in here. This section on the median income is really interesting. I'm just really fascinated by all the things you've brought together, so thank you. One thing I'm wondering, First, I guess I thought we had a bus route that went up to Deganic, but I don't see it on the map, which is not really part of this plan, but it's just something I'm noticing now that I'm looking at the map. And then the second thing is I'm wondering, we have these couple of agreements with neighboring bus systems. Can you give me a description of sort of how they connect outward from the TCAT routes?
Yeah, so
to
this,
other counties.
yeah, the map that's used on the front page and comes back on page, I don't, somewhere in here, talking about the routes. This one, I will be honest, it's not my favorite map. I think it's a little bit difficult to read. This came straight from the FTA database. It's our GTFS feed, General Transit Feed Specification. And the reason I wanted to use this map was, again, because they're gonna use it for if we apply for new projects or a new transportation, anything. I want to match what the FTA has. But because of that, it's difficult to see the rural routes versus the urban routes, and it also doesn't include any of those neighboring counties of Chemung or Cortland or Schuyler County.
So which nodes, like which directions do they go out of the county in? Just so I can have that in my...
Yeah, up to the top right in Cortland, where by Dryden, TC3, that connects to Centro, and then down southwest towards the Chemung Schuyler area.
Okay, thank you.
Randy?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. For the new legislators, this is a greatly improved department. And the data is much better, and a lot of, as Frank mentioned about pulling in grants from prior years, has been improved greatly. I mean, in early, I think in '24, we pulled in some old grants in it, and we had to go through a whole process of being approved by the various authorities that are giving us money, and that's all been updated, so it's greatly improved. I think this is a great document that I'd love to discuss with you, but it's a lot of good data there, but that'll be another day because that'd take a long time.
Other questions? I appreciate the continued work in the Cortland direction. I know out in my district there's a lot of the older population that their doctors and pharmacies and services they rely on are over in that direction. So the barriers do exist, and your attention to those has been very helpful and noted.
Thank you.
Further questions? If not, are we adopting? Yes, we are. The Tompkins County Transportation Comprehensive Plan. Coordinated plan. But it is comprehensive in nature.
Sure.
All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you so much.
I've got to make a little mention here. I understand, Courtney, this is your last meeting with us and that you're moving on to other ventures. And in the words of Frank, you've done an awesome job, and we've really enjoyed having you here with us and appreciate the work you've done. Has been noted by the committee members. We've seen an awful lot of progress here forward, and you've been a big part of that, and we're going to miss you, and we thank you for your service to Tompkins County.
Thank you so much, and I'm going to miss you all as well.
Best luck on future endeavors.
Thank you so much.
Well, you beat me to the punch, but I was going to say the same
Please,
thing.
Katie.
So thank you, Lee. This is tremendous way to exit Courtney with 7 resolutions and completing the coordinated, comprehensive, fantastic plan in the last few weeks here has been tremendous. And Courtney's with us for 2 more weeks. And I also wanted to let people know where we are in the process of hiring a new transportation planner. We were fortunate enough to get 35 applicants for the position, and we are in the final stages of trying to hire somebody. And we do have a new fiscal coordinator, Kayla Mayberry, starting on Monday to work in support of the transportation division. So we'll be missing Courtney a lot. We really will, but we will have a full team helping Frank soon as well.
Katie, thanks for that update and providing the information. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Courtney, thank you. We'll move ahead to the Highway Department. Nick's got a couple of resolutions that appear to be interrelated here, both the amendment to the capital plan and an agreement for its implementation. Why don't I get the first resolution on the floor under 8A, authorizing an amendment to the 2026-2030 capital plan and a contract with Barton and LaJudas DPC for design and right-of-way services for Caroline Depot Road Culvert Project over 6 Mile Creek tributary, Town of Caroline, ID number 14147. Moved by John, second by Judith. And Nick, I think we did something similar here the other night on Hines Road.
We did. This one is a little bit different with the funding. This is a WQIP grant from the New York State DEC. So it works a little bit different than a Bridge New York contract. But this one is it's a failing culvert, very narrow. There's a couple gravel beds over there, so it's a fairly important one because it sees a lot of weight and a lot of traffic every day. Luckily, we got awarded for this because if not, it would have been some in-house funds because the timing was coming to the point it needed to get done. And one of the kind of interesting things with this one is there's a 20% local match, but that local match can be with county funds. So this one like in-kind services. So this one we intend to hopefully we'll get Barton and LaJudas working on the survey and the design to get the hydraulics figured out and then get through the permitting with the DC. And once we can at least get far enough through that they accept the size of what they're proposing, we're thinking this is most likely going to be a precast concrete box culvert. So if it does end up going that direction, the important part of this is getting to the point where we can bid this box this winter so that we can hopefully be into construction next summer. So if we can bid this winter, get it going, get it on precasters list, then we would hopefully be able to get it in next summer. And we would do this every year we do a material and services bid. So in our service side, we have contractors that bid time and materials. They bid their equipment, their laborers, foremans, operators, carpenters, all of that. So if we go down that route to do this and we use them to help us, we can really keep the overall cost. There isn't a lot of profit built into something like that, like there would be a normal bid. So then with us assisting with this, the in-kind, we very easily could take care of that whole local share.
Sorry about that. Questions for Nick? Judith?
Thank you. So this project must have come up kind of all of a sudden since it's not in this plan. That's why it's being added out of cycle?
It came up because it's hard to add something to the plan when you don't know you're going to get awarded.
Okay.
So, I mean, we could, and that is more conversation with kind of us and administration and how we kind of want to angle that because there is some more opportunities out there. But you really have no idea until they send you a letter and say, by the way, hey, you've been awarded. And then the push for us to do this now rather than wait and put it in the plan through the budget season or the next budget, is to get the design going.
Right.
The importance of timing to try to get this project done in 2027.
Right. I mean, I guess we had one instance where money was not needed that was already in the capital plan because you got the grant. And in this case,
Yes.
we have to add, like, it feels like the capital plan needs a way to somehow plan for these things because it is cost that we'll have to pay in this case and cost we didn't have to pay in the other case. And if we know these things are going to come in one direction or the other, then it would be nice to have a plan. And it's not really a highway issue. It's more, I'm looking at Norma. My other question is it says at the end that any cost over the state share, the $1,298,000, will be fully the county's responsibility. Do you have a sense of what the chances are of the cost going above that number?
Because of how we're going to do it, pretty slim. If we were going to bid this out completely as a turnkey project, then it would probably be very close or above our numbers. That's the hard part with the inflationary factor. This was put together a year ago. Mm-hmm. So it's still fairly accurate, but as
the
time...
sooner we work on it, the better the chance.
Yes.
And then I didn't quite understand what you meant about in-kind costs. There's the $324,000 of county costs. Are you saying that that could partially be in-kind and not actually county dollars? It's like work by your department?
Yes, it would be work by our department. So yes, it is truly county dollars, but it is our crews, our equipment. Our equipment is, rated with FEMA rates. Our labor is all rated with our fringe. We keep track of all that very closely in our OpenGov or cartograph system, which is very easy at the end to print a report and provide it to the DEC and say, we have, 500,000 into this, because you're recouping, it'd be on the operating side, kind of, in a sense. So it is county dollars, but county dollars that are already obligated. Okay, so is it that we have to approve this so that the money goes into your budgets to pay the cost of actually doing the in-kind work? I'm trying to understand why we're approving this county expenditure if it's coming out of your department. We have to approve it for, and we've been in close communications with Daryl at Finance. So we need to approve this one to go into a contract with the DC. Okay. Just like we would the DOT on the bridge projects. And then the other side of this would be to enter in a contract with Barton and LaJudas, our selected design firm. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Judith. Dan?
I was just going to ask about the phrasing of amendment, but I believe you've addressed that already. It's not that this project was a surprise. It's that the arrangement of funding needs to be adjusted. That's all. So, thank you.
Yes.
Thanks for the clarification. Further questions? Randy.
Nick, I think that we're now looking at these types of highway projects out 10 years. We're putting a 10-year plan together. Is that correct for our capital budget? It's usually been a 5-year kind of look. Now we're taking it out 10 years.
Right, 20.
Related
20
to
years.
What highway is. So I think it gives them more time. Some of these things, happen quick, right? The state comes through and goes, oh, we're flagging that one, right? So this way we can look a little farther out.
And if I can just add, so one of the questions, so when any expenditures have to be authorized by the legislature, so this is authority to spend, regardless of whether it's fully funded by another source, it still has to be authorized to spend in the budget. And we've been working very closely with Nick's team at Highway, and I think I've got several years worth of projects that are in the next capital plan.
That's great. I'm still learning, so I really appreciate the explanation.
Of course.
And I just wanted to add, based on your question about if the project goes over, is a requirement to include it in some of those projects that are funded by state agencies, that we will make sure we complete the project based on the funding that we're receiving. So if it goes over the budget, we have to find the money to complete the project. And that's the reason why they're giving us the funding. So it is also in our best interest to make sure we get the project done quickly so that we stay within the budget provisions.
Dan?
Just for the clarification here, in-kind stuff, when we get a grant like this that requires a 20% match or whatever match, we can either pay for it with real dollars or we pay for it in kind. But in order to demonstrate that we have made that match, if it's in kind, we need to track all of that so that we can show the reports that here's the dollars that we've expended on our internal labor, and that then gets filed to show we've met the local portion. Just putting that out there.
Yes, and with our Cartograph, it was Cartograph, now it's OpenGov, but with the asset tracking software, we've kind of, I don't want to say we've mastered it because we keep tweaking things, but starting last year, we were using those reports to get our CHIPS reimbursements. Mm-hmm. And that's, I mean, this New York State DOT is a little different than the DEC, but we have the option to tweak those reports to however they would like to see them. And it's all data, it's just how they want it. So currently we have been actually submitting through the state already, and they accept our forms of reports. So shouldn't be a problem with this one.
Further questions? If not, shall we vote? All in favor? Are there any opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Nick. Do you have anything else you want to bring to the committee's attention today before we move on to our other items?
Well, I think you have one more.
Resolution.
All right, there's one more to vote on. I think I've probably explained it enough, but there definitely is one more vote.
Yep. Sorry, next resolution under 8B, authorizing an agreement for implementation and funding in the first instance, 100% of the New York State DEC WQIP eligible costs of a new capital project, Caroline Depot Road culvert over 6 Mile Creek tributary, and appropriating of funds therefore. ID number 14146, moved by Dan, second by Judith. Questions related to the resolution?
A question.
Randy.
This is a question on funding, I think. So when we do a project like this, do we have to expend the money and then get reimbursed?
Yes.
Okay, so is this where you might do a ban or determine whether
That's
you can
right.
use current money?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks.
This is where we've kind of been in really close conversations with Daryl about cash flow and how much are we expecting right up front. We've gotten a lot better at reimbursements. So if we can continue to get reimbursements faster, it's a lot less money that's out there for that long period of time. And Daryl, for this one, has a plan to take care of things.
Great, appreciate that.
Further questions? Shall we vote? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Now I'll ask, anything else you'd like to?
Couple updates. Fuel. That's always that seems to be a popular topic here in the last couple months. A little good news is it is starting to trend back down, and that kind of has been happening a little bit prior to the most recent announcements of what's going on overseas. So hopefully that's going to get even better. We actually just ordered fuel the other day, and that order was $4.43. So that's about 60 cents less than a gallon, less than our last order about a month ago. Before this order, we were about 60% spent for the year in the 5th month. So we're definitely going to be watching it closely, and as time progresses here, probably going to have to come for some more money to offset fuel costs, just like probably every other department in the county. But we've been working with administration, kind of keeping an eye on it. Right now, we're not in trouble. We have about 3 more orders worth of money in there, so that's roughly 3 months. So as it gets closer, we can get a better feel of a real number we'd need to ask for to cover that.
Maybe our sales tax revenues will be up as a result of the
Yes.
fuel costs.
That would be nice.
How much is the annual fuel allotment that you have? I'm trying to get a sense of how much this might end up being over.
Well, our annual, I don't
Or any number that can help me peg, like how much do you have left? If that's
Quick-
40%.
Quick number is a couple hundred, and I don't know where that sheet is. Easily a couple hundred is our normal budget, a couple 100,000
Per year.
per year.
Okay, so we're
Yes.
looking at maybe something less than 100.
Last time we had this issue, we were somewheres in the realm of 150,000-ish. That was worse than this one, so hopefully it's not that bad, but I would say it definitely for, on a highway sake, we'd be looking at probably at least 100.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Nick? Randy?
Not on this subject, though.
Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead, I think.
I took a walk around with the Newfield Town Board around their property and also county roads and whatnot. One of the things we noticed on the covered bridge that it needs repairs. And the roof is going bad in one area, and there's some other painting, peeling, and those kind of things. I know that's not a highway responsibility, I don't believe, for that bridge. And so the discussion came around SHPOs and how they get involved in these things. And so I don't know where to go with that. So I wanted to, it's an important bridge to the town and probably the oldest one in New York State you can probably drive over. So I just want to make sure it's maintained and it's got like a shake roof, I think. Wood shake roof, and you can see it's deteriorating and moldy and the whole bit. So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, we actually did a little digging with it kind of came up with the little insurance issue we had there 2 or 3 months ago. We did some looking and we looked back into the files at the last time we did some repairs and what those repairs were. And then some of my staff actually found a company, I don't remember which local state, I don't know if it's New Hampshire, where it was, that they were actually part of some of those repairs. And we had talked about kind of reaching out to them and seeing if we could get them to come do an assessment and give us a, proposal on, what does it need type of thing. So we definitely can dig into that a little deeper and just see who exactly is on the hook and just see what kind of the costs would be too. I mean, we do a lot of, we clean it and we linseed. I think it's a linseed oil mix that goes on the inside and on the floor and stuff. But, outside of that, the roof is starting to definitely look like it could use some repairs. So we can do some digging into that and keep you posted on what we find.
Great, thank you. And since Katie's here, we looked at the whole area around there, and they have a walkway and view area and those kind of things, and that's deteriorating as well. So the town's going to have to, that's on town property, it's not county property. They're going to have to do some work there. And so they want to know if there was any funding for that. So I'm sharing that. And also I think that there's some ideas that they have for better viewing and better access and safety. There's quite a few safety issues there where it drops off like this and there is no fence or anything. And so the town, I pointed out that's a liability to the town. I'm not sure how far the right of way for the county goes off of that, but it may be some of the county's land as well. So I just want to make you aware of that.
I would encourage them to look at the CFA announcement that's out right now. There might be some preservation funding there or Main Street funding that they could apply for to help them with those costs.
Okay, thank you.
Judith.
This is not related to the highway department, but I just wanted to note that a tornado watch has just been issued for this county and surrounding counties. That just means the weather conditions are such that there could be the development of a tornado. If there's a tornado warning, that's when they see a funnel cloud, that people should make sure that they go to a safe area, and maybe a watch is a good time to know where those safe areas are. What are our safe areas in this building? Is it just downstairs?
I mean, we've gone to the basement. That's where we usually go, and it felt quite safe down there. It's a big, heavy building. It seems safe. But yeah, I don't know the official answer for that.
Thanks. Anything further, Nick?
Yeah, any sort of weather event is always a highway problem. So definitely, we cross our fingers. We definitely don't want to see that anywheres, but we are always watching the weather very closely. Trees. This time of year it's a lot with trees, just with everything's leafed out. So you get a little rain and any wind and it's pretty hard on them.
Might be a busy day.
It could be. Hopefully not, because my staff is off today because of the holiday, and the 410s that we work today lands their holiday. So we'll keep things, keep an eye out.
I was interested, it kind of brings to mind the 6 Mile Creek tributary with the Caroline Depot Road. That's always been a problematic area for us from a storm standpoint, and we've done a lot of work on all of those bridges and culverts up through there over the last 20 years with these types of storms that go through. So I appreciate that continued attention to the area.
Yeah, that's pretty colorful. Radar.
If nothing further for Nick, Katie's moved up to the table and we've got some business under planning and sustainability. And are you addressing us on Chaffee Creek Road?
I am. I don't know if you and Dan got the email I sent yesterday afternoon. I copied the clerks as well. At any rate, I'm requesting pulling these two resolutions. Late yesterday afternoon, I was made aware that the Finger Lakes Land Trust, who's part of this deal, their attorney doing title research discovered 2 gas leases on the property, which is apparently very, very common around here. But it'll take a little while to work that out. And of course, we would want our county attorney's office to review all the documents and make sure we're in good shape. So, one of the leases is from 1980 and the other is from 2005. So they don't think it'll be any problem to get released from these leases, but want to give time for that to play out and make sure that we get the attorney's stamp of approval before moving forward on this.
Okay, Dan.
Was this also not a problem for the Finger Lakes Land Trust when they acquired this?
They have not, they have an option to acquire, and this is their due diligence before they acquire. It's their attorney who discovered the leases.
And also, just one thing for Katrina. In this resolution, there was an opening. It's 26-XX. So those kinds of things, I think, should probably be cleaned up. The other night at the legislator meeting, we had a blank too that Shauna had to read through. I don't know.
Was it the neg deck or?
Yeah, with the XX, is that?
Yeah, this is 9A. That just as an example. I mean, in Tuesday night, Shauna literally read through blank.
The one that Shauna read through the other night, it was dependent on a previous one being adopted, and so we fill in the numbers afterwards.
Okay.
So this one, I'll go ahead and we'll look at it.
Yep.
Okay, with the committee's consent, we'll pull those 2 resolutions. And Terry's coming up to join with Katie here. And
I have a question.
Before we open up the presentation, go ahead, Randy.
Yeah, I'm just talking about the natural infrastructure funding, and it's been drawing down. Is there any plan to try to to put more funding back into it, or?
Yes, when this was first established, the Natural Infrastructure Capital Fund in 2017, it was set up as $200,000 a year would be put into this fund, and it would roll from year to year to be able to accumulate a balance for any big projects that we would want to participate in and support. I think 2 years ago, the legislature decided to pause the $200,000 going into the fund. It's set to begin again in the 2027 budget. So that, at least is what I understand, is in the capital program right now, would be $200,000 going into this fund again in 2027.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Are we ready for presentation in district geothermal?
All right.
Take it away. So I think over the last few months, we have been discussing our options in geothermals. We're waiting for some results and so we got the details, so we're happy to go through where we are and get your feeling of what the next step should look like and how we can integrate probably with the son of government if possible and things like that.
Yeah, so jumping first slide here into kind of a little bit of the background and history. There it goes. So this all really started in 2024, kind of conceptualized the idea of what would it be like to bring what is called a thermal energy network to help decarbonize the DeWitt Park block. It was the idea of could we create an interconnected system that would allow us to bring HVAC to all of the buildings. We applied for a Park Foundation grant. We received that grant, $50,000, to help us do a NYSERDA FlexTech feasibility study. So it was a cost share with NYSERDA at that point. Together, Rel and I selected CHA consultant out of Syracuse that's been working on a thermal energy network in Troy, New York, to help lead the study. And then in 2025, we started doing that study. The original idea was to look at what we would normally think of as a traditional geothermal system, so closed loop, multiple boreholes connected to each building. And in the final report for that, which I've presented to this committee previously, it looked like a system like that could potentially service the center of government and contain most of the load for this building in the old jail, but it would need a supplemental system in order to reach what we call peak design days, so the coldest days of the year essentially, and it wouldn't be able to do any of the additional buildings that the original conceptual framework looked at. So when we had thought about this originally, it was not only encompassing all of our buildings, including the main courthouse, which that plan wouldn't do, but it was also looking potentially at the churches and the Boardman House. So at that point, I think when we had talked with the committee, and we were like, well, it's looking like a district system might not be able to happen in this. It might not be feasible. It happens with a feasibility study. That's why you do it. But in late 2025, we were talking with CHA a little bit, and they had received word that NYSEG, who'd been doing a utility thermal energy network in the north side of the city over by the Science Center, had done a borehole test, and they had really liked the results of it, had said that the geology under Ithaca is pretty incredible, that there might be enough energy under the city in terms of the aquifer to really supply all of the city for the heating and cooling that it would need if you were to do an open loop system. And so CHA reached out to us and said, do you want to look at an open loop system? So what is an open loop system? So that traditional geothermal system is really what you picture on the left-hand side of the system. It's multiple wells, multiple boreholes that go into the earth. It's piping that's all interconnected. You're running a solution, usually glycol, through the system. It's absorbing the heat or the cooling, the energy from the earth. It's bringing it back into the building, running that through heat exchangers and heat pumps and supplying that heat and cool to the building. An open loop system is more what you see on this right-hand side of the system, where instead of having those multiple boreholes, those multiple wells, this system, and I believe maybe Arel even brought this up at the legislature on Tuesday, it's only going to have two wells. It'll have what's called a production well and an injection well. And that production well will bring up water from the aquifer, the pressurized aquifer that exists underneath the city of Ithaca. It'll bring that water in, it'll run it through the heat exchangers, and it'll dump it out. And because of the resource that exists, the belief of this resource and the testing that's been done, it seems like it's a lot more favorable than trying to do a traditional system. There's just a lot more energy potential for us to absorb. Now, the danger with open loop systems, and this is what happened, I heard Quay mention the Museum of the Earth, is that when you're bringing in water, you're introducing a new element. You're not just running a solution that you know the chemical contents of. You're bringing in water with water quality that you might not be sure of. And so the initial testing that NYSEG has done has indicated that while the iron content might be a little bit high in the water, a lot of the other elements that you might see as corrosive to a system, because the danger is that it's going to corrode the gaskets, it's going to corrode the piping, and it's going to lead to increased maintenance, it's going to lead to premature failure of equipment. A lot of what you might see in other geology, other aquifers, isn't present in the water. And so the belief is that you can treat the water to a quality that it's not going to lead to some of those premature failings or some of those corrosive elements with the gaskets. And so in 2020, late 25, 26, after these long conversations with CHA, they discovered that there was this heat recovery grant that was available from NYSERDA. And typically this isn't a grant that would normally qualify for what we were doing, but they were able to convince NYSERDA that there was enough tie-in with heat recovery that it would make sense for us to be able to look at doing a little bit beyond a feasibility study. They had already done a lot of the groundwork on our buildings, and so it was moving more to see if we were to do an open loop system, what would that look like to the point of schematic design. And so that's what we've been working on. This is a lot of what I'm presenting today is kind of the first iteration of that. And what you'll see here is the existing systems that exist in all of the county buildings. So that's the other thing I should say, is that this new study was looking only at county buildings. There is the potential to expand it beyond that. It adds a lot of complexity, it adds costs, and especially because we're trying to dovetail with the center of government process. For now, we've kind of set aside the other elements of DeWitt Park and have really focused just entirely on the county-specific buildings. So, what this would look like, it would be the 2 wells that I mentioned. I believe that there was a map that was shown the other day, and I'll have a map a little bit later that I can point this out, but one of the wells would be right outside this building here, likely in the grassy area next to the parking, and the other well would be towards the center of government. We're trying to have a certain distance between the wells because you don't want the water to commingle. You don't want the water that you've taken the heat out of or the coldness out of to then migrate to the other well that you're then drawing from again, because then you're just losing that energy potential. So we need to have some level of distance. There would be a central system, so the water would come out. It would go into a central system that would be located in the old jail basement. It would replace what you see in these pictures, that's these giant cast iron boilers. It would continue to utilize the old jail boilers as a backup system, so we would have some redundancy and resiliency, which is incredibly important, obviously, when you're talking about government buildings, the center of government, potentially the main courthouse, all these other buildings. And as it currently exists, the conceptual framework has been done for phase 1, which would be the center of government, but it would allow for that future growth to then grow to the Daniel D. Tompkins building, the old jail, and the main courthouse. So in that phase 1, this was a part of the consultant report. It was looking, if you were to just do a baseline, which was looking at a traditional boiler system for the center of government, which obviously we weren't going to do anyways, but they did it as just a baseline versus what we're proposing. It does show that while you would end up with a higher electric peak, you would ultimately end up saving in terms of electricity, saving in terms of natural gas, and saving in terms of money. So I included this slide. I don't know that it says a lot because that wasn't the direction that we were going anyways, but I did want to show that there is some efficiencies going over even what would be a more traditional system that a non-county entity might do. So the phase 1 cost 1 estimate that they provided the consultancy was $1.9 million. These have largely been folded into the center of government costs. They've been sent to the estimator along with the rest of the center of government. It includes site work for the old jail, it includes the wells, and it includes the mechanical equipment, including the piping to get to the different buildings. You can see there where the wells are. This graphic, we've since changed it so that orange dot should be, I don't know if my mouse shows when I do this. It looks like it doesn't, but it should be more in that grassy area above the this building. But you can see the production well is kind of right where the center of government is, and you can see where the piping goes to supply both the well return, the well supply, the production well, et cetera. And what the other thing we determined was that there was going to be a 65% cost reduction versus doing a closed loop system. And so a lot of this is driven by the fact that you're just doing a lot less drilling. You have a lot less piping actually going into the ground because you're not having to do all those interconnected pipes between all the wells. And so you do see a big savings between doing 50, 60, 75 wells and just doing 2 wells, even though they are more substantial wells. So in terms of future phases, we conceptualize this either as a phase 2 and 3 or potentially just a second phase that combines. So phase 2 would potentially be extending to the old jail in the Daniel D. Tompkins building, utilizing the existing building tunnel that that exists underneath these two buildings to help reduce costs. It could potentially reuse what we call terminal equipment. So if you see like the fin tube kind of on the side of this building, the side of this room, or if you go into the offices downstairs, you'll see a lot of the offices have kind of fan units, as are the terminal units. Again, we could use those for cost savings, but they're all also approaching end of life. I think, Aurel can speak more to this, but they are due for replacement in the near future anyways, and so this would be an opportune time to do that. The main courthouse, if we were to go to that eventually with phase 3, would utilize the pedestrian tunnel that was utilized at one point, is no longer utilized, and it was used for heating and cooling also, and so that could be reutilized as well. So part of the reason why this is such a viable thing is because we already have a lot of the connections between the buildings. We wouldn't be having to redo these connections. So for future phase scope, assuming phase 1, which is the center of government, is complete, it would use heat pump chillers to serve Daniel D. Tompkins in the old jail. It would replace the old jail equipment to accommodate the new system, so that those cast iron boilers in the basement. It would be removing existing condensing units, some minimal renovation to the old jail mechanical room. We're making an assumption that there's no major flood mitigation measures that are needed, and so that's something that Aurel and Tetra Tech have been digging into, and we believe that we're able to avoid any major renovations because of that. It would be replacing rooftop units and air handling units at the courthouse to use water source heat pump versions. It would necessitate a large electrical service upgrade because we'd be using a lot more electricity. And ultimately, we would also have to bear the cost of connecting the existing boiler system to the new system, so that if the center of government, if the geothermal had to go down for maintenance, for instance, that we would still be able to supply heating and or cooling over to the center of government. So future phase costs, I'll say that these are still being determined, but the initial estimate is about $3.95 million. It does not include an alternate, which is to switch out additional terminal equipment for about $750,000. And it also assumes that phase 1 through the center of government is complete. I will say that price tag also doesn't look at some potential funding opportunities, so it doesn't include the clean energy tax credit. So this is something that's already been planned for the center of government. But if we were to do more phases simultaneously, it would allow us to go for that tax credit to cover additional work as well. There's a little bit of a sequencing issue where if we were to do the center of government and then wait 5 years to do the additional phases, we wouldn't be able to qualify the additional equipment for the tax credit because it would just be seen as an addition. It wouldn't be seen as doing a geothermal project. We're also looking at there's NYSERDA funds. So there used to be a program opportunity known as PON 4614 that allowed for feasibility study, then design, and then implementation. It's since gone away. I was talking with NYSERDA last week, and they indicated that there is some potential hope that it might come back, and so that would allow us to hopefully mitigate some additional costs. We've also been approached by a company that's been working on open loop systems with some siren alert, probably about the tornado warning. There was a company that approached us about potentially placing some equipment with us that would help improve redundancy as well. So that would maybe mitigate some potential initial equipment costs. And then the other thing would be the reduction of the future capital costs. And so a lot of what we're doing is replacing systems that are approaching end of life. And so this building, the old jail, the main courthouse, all have equipment that's approaching end of life and needs to be replaced as well. And so while the price tag looks large, and it is large, $4 million, $5 million, it is work that'll have to be done in the next 5-10 years anyways. And so hopefully that can be used to be seen as reducing some of the costs overall. So a lot of details there. I'm happy to take on any questions that I can. I'll say this is largely based on the draft for phase 1. The consultancy is working on the report that'll include what expanding it out to a phase 2 or 3, so expanding it out to the other buildings would look like. And so when that's complete, I'll come back and present on that, and that'll have more detailed cost estimates as well, not just that initial estimate. So,
just curious, you know how deep the wells go?
And this is something I should have mentioned in the report. So part of the issue that we ran into with doing the traditional system is that there is a reservoir that exists about 200 feet under the city of Ithaca, and there's a real hesitancy to tap into that. And so normally with a traditional geothermal system, you would dig wells to about 500 feet, and that was largely because that was where the DEC permitting process ended. It's since been extended, so now you're seeing geothermal wells go to 600, 700, even beyond that. Because of that reservoir that exists under the city, there's a real hesitancy to go beyond 200 feet, and that really limits the heat load, the energy potential that you're able to get. And so these wells would be going 175 feet just to give a real buffer to that 200-foot limit.
Question for maybe Corsa and Rel. Timeline considerations with the Center of Government project, decision points with the information Terry's bringing to us?
Yes, so we have discussed this over the last couple of weeks with HALT as well. So as Quay indicated on Tuesday, there is aspect of this project which is already being taken care of within the Center of Government project. The second and the third phase will be considered as part of the renovation project of Old Jail, which will be the second layer of the Center of Government project. So we are reasonably on time. We will have to talk to them again further in terms of how to move forward with the design phase of this project. So there are several sub-consultants their services are being secured by HALT to do some of the sub work. So internally, we will discuss it to either determine whether we would like to move forward with a direct contract with CHA, or if CHA can come in as a subcontract under HALT to supervise this part of the project. That may be a preferred option because CHA has already done this. So if you bring in a new person, they'll have to maybe start the whole process again, which will delay timeline. So we will speak with HALT and RL and determine what's the best approach to move forward with. But based on my understanding from HALT, there is reasonableness in the timeline in accommodating the work that we need to do in this area, which will not delay the bigger project itself. So we can accommodate this as part of the project planning for the whole Center of Government.
Okay, thanks. I know it's desirable to a lot of my colleagues in the legislature, and it sounds as though we're getting there. And this kind of provide you alternatives to some of the deferred maintenance and future projects with replacements within these older buildings.
Awesome.
Your sense of how this would help you in the long-term plans, capital-wise and infrastructure-wise?
Yeah, I think it would help us greatly. We've been in conversations for months with Terry, with HALT, with CHA, and we've coordinated this project so it doesn't hold up Center of Government, but it also enables district geothermal to move forward. I mean, originally, months ago, the geothermal, everything was going to be in the Center of Government building. And at that time, we were talking about a closed loop system. Now with the open loop system, we have to do fewer wells, just 2 at this point, and that will actually be enough capacity for not only Center of Government, but all the other buildings that Terry has indicated. So as part of the Center of Government project, we're doing the wells, the 2 wells. We're basically clearing out the old boiler room. Some of you have seen it. I think, Randy, you've seen the old boiler room.
Right.
And it's huge in its space. It's just been sitting there vacant for years. It's not really good for occupied use, but it is great for mechanical use. So that'll work. We've coordinated this for the last several months, actually since the beginning of the year, talking how to move this forward. I've always had in the capital plan that I've shared with this committee in the past to upgrade the HVAC systems in these 3 buildings. This building, Old Jail and Main Courthouse. This building, we haven't done any upgrades for, 45 years. It's a very simple system. It's basically, a radiant hydronic system, as Terry pointed out before, and air handlers, one in the attic above and one in the basement. They've performed well, but they've well exceeded their service life. So we have already that planned in our capital project. So depending on the total cost with the geothermal and all of the improvements that Terry mentioned, is that $750,000 or such is more than adequate. Our budget can supplement the district geothermal to make those upgrades in these 3 buildings. So I support it. We'd like to move forward. I think timing-wise, since the Center of Government project is first starting with the building, the main building, and then once we start construction, we're going to then come back to do design on the old jail in this building. That's the time to go into the design development and contract documents. So timing-wise, I think it's great. We can still take advantage of the tax rebate. We don't want to go beyond 5 years, because 5 years from now, we'll have completed all of the buildings. So I think timing-wise, it'll work. Funding-wise, we have funding for the HVAC portion, so I support that. I look forward to doing that. We've been talking about this for several years now. So no hesitation or concern about advancing this project if the legislature would give us that direction.
Judith.
Thanks. I'm fascinated by the 65% cost reduction. That seems like a really big deal. I'm wondering if that's already been absorbed in the plans for the new center of government, like this new building design that we got for $50 million. Is part of that modification taking advantage of this cost reduction?
Well, some of the savings has enabled us to do the improvements needed in the old jail. So, I mean, new construction, that was already planned to do mechanical room for the center, or for the geothermal, but this pivot now to doing the central plant, the old jail, those costs have been absorbed as part of the center of government project. So yes, so
okay.
the savings in the geothermal wells have enabled us to do work in the old jail.
And is the $1.9 million the cost of building the system, or is there already, are there grants that are going in to turn it into $1.9 million? Like how, if we didn't have the grants, would it be $1.9 million?
Yeah, it's $1.9 million. So that, and that $1.9 million isn't including the funding that would return through a tax credit if we were able to secure that tax credit. It doesn't include, you know, we got the $2 million from NYSERDA for the Building Cleaner Communities competition, which isn't specifically allocated to geothermal, although that's one of the potential uses for it. So it's exclusive of any potential
So some part
grant
of this is covered by grants. Is that what you're saying?
Conceivably, yes.
Okay.
I hesitate to say that, right, because like I said, the Building Cleaner Communities competition, that can cover a range of things, and so I don't want to say it's covering this and then we use it to cover, you know, the shell of the building, right. And then, you know, it looks like we're double dipping. And then the tax credits, it's with how we've seen things with the current administration, it's hard to be sure that it would necessarily exist 2 or 3 years from now when we go to get it. Our belief, it exists now. If the project was completed tomorrow, we would be able to go after the tax credits, but I don't want to project into the future.
How much would the tax credits be if we were going to go after, if we were completing it today?
Yeah, so the base level of the tax credit is 30%. There's additional ways to get up to 40% or even 50% based on if you're using made in America products, if you're meeting domestic content steel requirements. And actually with geothermal, it's a lot easier to meet those requirements than it would be for solar or wind, which previously also were able to take in those credits. And then it would just be that times whatever the project cost ends up being, right? So it would be 30% of 1.9 million if you're just looking at the center of government, or it'd be 30% of the greater cost if you were to combine all the phases together. You do take a little bit of a haircut when you use tax exempt bonds. So I think it's like 15% of the 30% ends up being cut. So like with the geothermal project that we did at Bostwick Road, I think we technically qualified for $2 million in returned grants there, but we were only able to get 1.7 because we had done tax exempt municipal bonds. But yeah.
Okay, and my last question is, does the 1.9 million estimate, does that include the HVAC equipment in the new center of government building?
Yes.
Like, therefore, it's like replacing costs that we would have to spend on some other HVAC equipment?
So the 1.9 million, I think, is really inclusive of all equipment to run the center of government and to then make expanding it out feasible, right?
Right.
So it's like making a bigger system than you might necessarily have done if it was just the center of government, right? So if you told me today, you know, under no circumstance will the county ever do a district system, I think you would see that 1.9 shrink to an extent because you wouldn't be oversizing. For instance, you might not use as many heat exchangers. You might lower you might do different sized wells because you would know that you weren't going to be needing to pull as much water.
I'm just trying to understand, because you have the baseline versus proposed for the annual running cost, right? Where there's some savings with geothermal, but you don't show the baseline cost of if we didn't do geothermal, how much would we have to spend anyway just to have an HVAC system, which I think would probably be pretty substantial.
Yeah.
Right, so it's not that we're paying an extra $1.9 million. We're replacing some of that cost that we would have to spend on something else like boilers or, you know, natural gas heaters or air source cooling or whatever. And so I think the cost maybe comes across as a bit inflated compared, if I'm understanding correctly.
Yeah, I think when Quay originally was putting the budget, when in the conversations I've had with them, and maybe Raul can correct this, when they were originally looking at doing just a system for the center of government, a traditional system, it was $2 million, right? So it's similar in cost to that.
Yes, and I just want to add that $1.5 million is part of our $50 million project. It's not additional money.
Yeah.
Do I get a sense, Randy?
Go ahead.
Do I get a sense from the committee that we want Terry and Rel and company to move forward with developing this concept?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for working on this for a long time. I got a few questions on the wells themselves.
Yeah.
So we did a well test here.
Yeah.
Did we find that same aquifer here?
Yes, yeah, it does exist under here. We had good water pressure.
Okay, and you mentioned this, we wouldn't need more wells to expand it.
To do just our buildings, we wouldn't need more wells to do it. If, for instance, there was some belief that we should be trying to extend the system to include the churches or the Boardman House, then yeah, that would require more wells.
Okay. And then you mentioned grants, and you mentioned system failure. So if something happened, you would use the heat from the boilers in the old jail to heat the center of government building?
Potentially, right? You could use it to heat the center of government building. You could use it to continue to heat these buildings. I'll also say that the center of government building is being designed in such a way that if there were to be some catastrophic failure, that a boiler would be able to be purchased and put into the building and be able to run it itself. But at this time, you know, I think the belief is that we would use the existing equipment or even replacing the current boilers at the old jail just for that redundancy's sake.
Of course, we'll have a generator too.
And there will be the generator as well, yes.
So the old boilers in the jail that Mike Lane has talked about for as long as I remember that have never been removed would be removed. And then this would go in that place. Would that change the flooring, the issue?
No, okay. No, there's ample ceiling height in there, more than needed.
Okay. I think the full legislature supports this idea. I'm glad it's moving forward. But my other question is, we're pulling fresh water out of the aquifer, and then we're putting water back in that's warmer. Or colder.
Or colder, depending on the season.
Okay. And it's in theory downstream, so to speak. So the water flow is that way, so to speak?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's going to go, that's why you have to move it that far.
Yeah, and I'll say, I mean, it is a huge amount of water, and it is extremely pressurized, and so I think the amount of water that will be taking out, the mixing that'll occur, I think it'll be like a blip. You know, I don't think it'll be a significant difference.
Okay. No concerns about contamination, because it's...
No, I mean, we won't be adding anything to the water, per se. It'll be coming through the system. There's some water quality that'll be done, so maybe some of the iron will be removed. And so I guess in that way, similar to a home system that you might see on somebody with a well, there might be some salts added, for instance, but nothing substantial, right?
Great. And lastly, I know that there's grants related to this whole project. If administration at some point, when we do the whole final thing, show us what grants are coming in for the whole project, if any, just to give us the total picture of that. So, I like the idea of expanding it if we could. I think it'd be a good understanding if we understood what those other systems are going to cost in a future date, and how much those things would cost compared to what this total project would cost if we decided to do all of it.
Yeah.
So if you, that number, it's a number, whatever that is, and
I think once we get the additional information for CHA with a more buttoned-down cost for what additional, expanding out to the additional buildings would be, I think at that point we can provide maybe a more comprehensive analysis of what the current projections were to replace that
We have a tornado
equipment.
warning, I believe.
Yeah, I'm just watching the stuff over there blowing around like crazy.
My phone ringing as our Cornell alerts coming into me saying stay inside the
It's going to
building.
stop raining before we have to leave.
Okay, but if there is a safety issue related to tornadoes, this is not a good space to be in, and we should move to the basement.
So it's not a watch anymore, it's a warning. Is that what you said?
Well, I don't know if it covers where we are exactly, but parts of Tompkins County.
I'm across Trumansburg and Freeville right now, but there is a concern for this area. So I'm watching that where we are.
Okay.
Keep us posted. Thank you.
Voting around.
Can we just delegate the action instructions to the safety group? We'll do what he says.
there you go.
You're in charge.
Thanks, Andrew.
Appreciate that, Dan.
Anything further on this? We've got one more presentation.
Just real quickly,
Yes.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dan.
No, I just wanted to jump in here. First off, I was thrilled reading through this. Thank you. Dynamite. I'm very happy. I have tons of technical questions that I'm not going to take a lot of time here, other than a couple that I will highlight. You addressed the spacing of the wells for mixing, and Randy also asked a question about flow. I was going to ask about flow direction, which Randy, you kind of said it moves this way, so you've got the wells in the right order. Is there a possibility that a depth difference might help as well? You don't have to answer that right now. You know, in other words, intake lower and put back shallower. This would be a single heat exchange in the basement of the old jail, and from there, conditioned fluid would be exchanged to the individual buildings. Is this right?
Black hall.
Yeah, okay. I've got the understanding right here. And then in the additional buildings, there would be a further heat exchanger. I know there was mention of rooftop units here that may or may not go to the roof, maybe in the basement, wherever it is, it doesn't matter, but there's an additional exchange in each of the individual buildings, right?
Yeah, there's heat pumps in the additional buildings.
Yeah. I think those are my highlights, but dynamite. I was very happy to see this read through this. Thank you.
Yeah, no, and feel free with those other technical questions to send them our way, and I'm happy to answer what limited amount I can, but to send it to experts like Arel or CHA to get you the full response.
I don't know if it matters or not, but I had a question. 6 blocks north of here where I used to live, there was a dairy, and the one house had an artesian well, meaning the water just came up of its own accord. So is there any pressure issue or help perhaps from possibility of that artesian pressure being present here as well?
I mean, I think it helps in the sense that there's enough flow, right? So if it was like a pretty static water underneath, there would be a lot more concerns over how much you're drawing and what the mixing would look like, you know, coming back to the question of, you know, is there going to be some cross migration? Is there going to be a depletion of the resource over time? You know, that's the real worry if you're using like a static body, like a pond, for instance. So you see open loop systems for a residential system that use a pond. There's only so much energy content in that pond that you can draw. And once you've drawn it, you're kind of out of luck there for whether you're trying to pull the heat content or the cooling content to heat or cool your building. And so I think to that point, that artesian pressure is helping with the mixing, with the flow rate, so that we don't run into those issues. We're not worried about the system resource depleting seasonally, which you would be with some systems.
Any further questions?
The only thing I wanted to add is, Terry, you will be providing a capital project for this, so you will be able to see how much is local, how much is grant fund, or expected to be grant funded. There's no guarantees there, but that will all come to the committee for budget 2027.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I think Dan expressed it. We're pleased to see the report that's come before us. So keep going. Thanks, folks. Leo Riley's with us. He's got a resolution on the agenda before we move to the presentation on TCAT. But Leo, do you have anything other than the resolution? Let me get that on the floor, and we'll ask you what else you might have. Under 10A, authorization to execute a contract with Culligan Quench for bottleless water cooler for Tompkins County Recycling and Materials Management, ID number 14162. Moved by Randy, second by Judith. Good morning, Leo.
Good morning, everybody. Yeah, the system's eliminating that water cooler type system over there. It adds a little safety, comfort to me, nobody lifting those bottles, and not to mention the waste reduction aspect of it, setting an example, I guess.
I'll come down and look at it when you get it.
Yeah,
I've got those at my location.
Do you?
Yeah.
Good, yeah. I know facilities had one installed, and you know, we might want to look at them in some of these other departments. Yeah.
Any questions? Moved and seconded. Judith, and then Dan.
How much do the 5-gallon water bottles cost annually, do you think? Just as a comparison?
Well, I can tell you, we'll save some change, but it's basically cost neutral. Yeah.
Leo, this is one of those water fountains that's got the thing you put your water bottle in, it squirts in and gives it the count of them. Okay.
Yeah, similar to that system over there, but it eliminates the bottles.
Further questions? All in favor? Thank you. Motion passes. Anything you want to touch on today? It's before we roll into the next.
Yeah, I'll give you a couple quick updates. We have been working on updating the laws. That's under the county attorney's office review right now. I don't know if Edna has any comments on that or updates. We've had one meeting with the county attorney discussing those updates, and yeah, it's still under review.
Yeah, we're still looking into it, and then we'll get back to you with any further details.
Okay.
Let's see, recycling guidelines, those are issued new in effective July 1st. We expect those in, and we will be doing some different distribution of those. County website, all the municipal location gets a lot of our handouts, and we'll put those new ones in place throughout the county. Obviously, one new addition, paper cups. So we'll start accepting paper cups. So like your fountain drinks at fast food or wherever, those can go right into the single stream and blended right into our mixed paper. So we'll be doing some outreach, notifying everybody that we got a new material that we can start accepting. Basically that's it, I think, all I have.
Okay, questions for Leo? Randy?
Yeah, thanks, Leo. Yeah, I won't beat a dead horse. You know how I feel about managing our materials. But I would like, in a future time, and I'm probably too late for the next budget year, to really understand the vision of recycling material management. Really, where do you see us going? And I know you have a plan that you're in your 3rd or 4th year of that plan. And you've got some aggressive goals on reducing your waste going up. But I'd like to understand the vision of where we're going and how we're going to really achieve those targets and how we can make it so more people are willing to recycle. And I also think that the younger generation is probably much more aware, it seems to me. I mean, maybe the older generation from the hippie areas like me, but the newer people, I think that they're much more receptive to things, and they want to have an impact or on their footprint So in future day, I'd like to know your vision for that. I know that I was reading an article about AI and how like Waste Management is sorting the material. I thought that was fascinating how they're doing it.
Yeah.
And they do it by pictures, right? The computers recognize, oh, that's that, and that goes over here. And so, I mean, I just want to understand the vision, and I realize it's money. But as you know, I'm well behind raising the annual fee to make those things happen.
Yep. Yeah. So just to comment on that, you know, as we're bringing our 2027 budget forward, you know, we'll certainly have some of those talking points as to you know, what we're adding in 2027 and longer vision. But yeah, it is all laid out in our solid waste management plan and an implementation schedule. And lastly, you know, I can tell you 2027, we're looking at stronger enforcement. We've got a code enforcement officer in place. We've been, again, meeting with county attorney, you know, helping to strategize, you know, getting him up to speed. And I want to say our timeline on those laws, we would, if everything goes as planned, we'd be adopting those revisions in December of this year. That's aggressive, but that's the timeline. But stronger enforcement is what we think is needed. Yeah.
Anything further? Thanks, Leo.
You're welcome.
Thanks. ITC, I don't see anything from there today. So we do have a presentation. Thanks, Andrew, for keeping an eye on things. And presentation, Tompkins Consolidated Area Transit, and fairly good-sized report was sent to us here and included in the agenda. Come forward wherever you'd like. You'd like to make introductions?
Sure. So my name's Matthew Rosenblum. I'm the general manager of TCAT, and with me I have Trevor Jensen, who's our planning and scheduling manager. He's responsible for all the routes, schedules, a lot of those detailed technical questions. So we were here, I believe it was in October, no, it was September of last year. So we have not been before the legislature since then. So, you know, we'll have a little bit of an update on kind of what we've been up to over the last, you know, 8-9 months. And we'll have some time for questions at the end. There's quite a bit of information in this report. So I'll try to move through it fairly quickly to leave enough time for questions. But if you'd like me to revisit anything in further detail, please just let me know.
Thanks, Matthew.
Okay. So we'll start with kind of some of the big accomplishments that we've had. We have 2 new hybrid buses that were delivered in 2026, one of which is in service. The other is going through some final maintenance before it will enter in service. We've drawn down on a number of old state and federal grants. We launched the E-Ride service, which is the on-demand transportation service for the west side of the city. That launched on June 1st, was a successful launch, all electric vehicles. We did a fairly substantial service increase in spring of 2026, increased frequencies of routes, and a number of routes are running now much later into the evening, which is leading to basically record post-pandemic ridership. So a little bit on kind of where we sit with some of the major projects. We have completed, a renewal of our fleet with 5 new diesel buses, 6 new battery electric buses, and 2 new diesel electric hybrid buses. We're in the process of disposing of some of our older diesel buses, which are well beyond their useful life, completely worn out, don't really provide the riders with the best experience. We're also in the process of rehabbing a number of our vehicles in the middle of their lives. We put on a tremendous amount of miles on our vehicles, much more so than most transit systems our size. So we burn through engines and transmissions, usually at least once throughout the lifetime of a vehicle, sometimes twice. So a number of our vehicles have been going through engine and transmission replacements. We're working on our 2018 family of vehicles right now. We've also installed a number of battery electric bus chargers for both our large battery electric buses as well as our e-ride buses in the facility. Again, the e-ride project that launched in June of 2026, we have open payment, which means that you can pay with your credit card in addition to a mobile app, and that it's fare capped, which essentially means that once you've hit certain milestones, you don't keep paying the single fare each time you ride, so it doesn't punish people that don't have the funds up front to purchase a monthly pass. And we've continued to do a load study for future fleet electrification planning. Additionally, we're continuing to support our project, or our facility. That's our next big project that's kind of up. I know there was a lot of talk earlier about HVAC. Much of our air conditioning in our facility is original to the building, which was built in 1993. The roof needs some attention. The driver's lounge, that project is continuing. We are also looking at upgrading the technology on our buses to a more modern technology system for bus tracking for both customers as well as dispatch. And we're in the process of updating both our accounting and our fleet management software. Some future opportunities for capital projects include CRP Flex funding, which will provide $2.7 million to upgrade our on-vehicle technology. We've applied for a grant with the state of New York for the Transit Ready Grant, $6 billion for articulated buses, which are larger buses to hold more people with one driver to improve efficiency, as well as facility upgrades to accommodate those larger buses. And we currently have $12 million from state and federal sources to continue to buy new buses, an orderly fleet replacement program so that we can replace a few each year and not have a glut of older vehicles all requiring replacement at the same time, which is, the situation we're kind of climbing out of. So a little bit about our performance. So Q1 of 2026, we had record high post-pandemic ridership. In January, we achieved 94% of our 2019 ridership. And then in April, again, we were within 91% of our 2019 ridership. You can see kind of where we track with previous years. It's been an excellent year for ridership. The buses are very busy. We're offering a lot of service, and as you offer more service, riders come back to the system.
I got a question for you on
Sure.
that. With the January number versus February, March, April, does that reflect the students being gone?
So it reflects, so because this is a comparison to 2019, I think what it shows is that we're drawing more riders during periods when there's less academic activity relative to 2019, meaning that we're probably doing better with maybe non-Cornell markets, but also, it's possible that there's less, students are taking less vacations, that perhaps there was more people that stayed in town. Now, when you compare to March is usually our busiest month in the first half of the year, and October and September are our busiest months the second half of the year. Those are very busy academic times, and we're still off a little bit on those months. So what this does suggest is we're probably doing a more balanced job of getting riders from both the Cornell and non-Cornell communities compared to where we were in 2019. If that kind of makes sense. I think it's, you know, it's the comparison of where we sat in 2019 and the differences between that.
Yeah, that helps. I mean, month-to-month volumes will vary based on, you know, how many people you got in the community, but the increase when the students are away actually indicates that the general public is using it more heavy. That's good to hear.
Yes, I think, you know, yes, I would agree with that, certainly.
Yeah.
May I follow on this same graph before you leave it? My question is similarly related. One, what's the big difference here? And about 4 minutes ago, you said that you had added some routes, either in frequency or in time of day, meaning later at night. Might that addition of routes be driving this number? And then how does that route count compared to 2019?
So I think that's absolutely what's going on. You know, we're running a similar level of service to what we did in 2019, and there's a slide coming up that will kind of compare productivity to where we were in 2019. But yes, as you add more service, more people ride. And you get to a point, we're kind of in a cycle right now where we've made the system so frequent and easy to use that individual users are using the system more often. And, you know, this tracks unlinked trips. So, you know, if someone's riding 7 times a day as opposed to in the past 3 times a day, that does make these numbers grow. So basically, this is a comparison of where we sit productivity-wise. So vehicle revenue hours, that's every hour a vehicle does in service, that counts as a revenue hour. In 2019, we were moving 31.7 riders per hour. We did about 135,000 hours in that year, almost 136,000. In 2025, we did 106,000 revenue hours. So we're still a little off of where we were before the pandemic. Staffing shortages, supply chain issues, vehicle availability. And our riders per hour in 2025 sat just below 30 riders per hour. But if you look at Q1 of 2026, we're at 34.44 riders per hour, which is extremely efficient. This is where we track very similar. This is where you would see large cities, San Francisco, Seattle, Chicago, Boston, not quite up to the levels of productivity you'd see in Manhattan, but these are big city numbers that are very unusual for a community our size.
Can I just clarify, that's riders per hour per bus?
Yeah, so it's per revenue hour. So every bus that does an hour, you know, in the day, that all gets aggregated up, and then it's divided by the number of riders, say, per that day. So I know there was a lot of interest from this group on rural services, so we'll talk a little bit about rural services, the rural network. You know, we do operate a pretty comprehensive rural network. It goes to more or less every corner of the county, going, you know, from Newfield, Trumansburg, Enfield, Lansing, Groton, Dryden, Caroline. You know, it's a pretty comprehensive geographic coverage that it provides. So, you know, this is kind of just a brief overview of each route. Essentially, you know, we have a number of routes that provide 7-day-a-week service to rural communities, such as the 21 to Trumansburg, 36 and 37 to Lansing, the 40 to Groton and Freeville, the 43 to Dryden, the 52 to Brooktondale and Caroline, and the 67 to Newfield are all 7-day-a-week routes. The 20 to Enfield runs Monday through Saturday, and the 65 to Danby is weekday only. Yes.
What's a half trip?
So for the 40 and 43 instances, one way we save money is that in the it's the 1908 43 out of downtown. Instead of running a bus to Groton and Freeville and a bus to Dryden at around the same time, we'll run a 43 to Dryden, Freeville, Groton.
You combine them, okay.
Correct, yes. Yep. And on the way inbound, it saves 30 minutes not to run in the 43 back.
So I know there was interest about Enfield specifically. So looking at the Enfield route, this is the current schedule. We currently have morning departures at 6:21. Or I'm sorry, 6:49 from the Enfield Park and Ride that reaches Cornell before 7:30 a.m. There's a mid-morning, and then there's 2 evenings to town, and then we have a trip that leaves Cornell a little after 4:30, and then another one at 6:55 p.m. On the weekdays, and then there's Saturday, there's 3 trips in each direction that are spaced throughout the day. This is a typical kind of pattern that you see. You always want to have like a late trip so that if someone is stuck working a little late at work, they are not stranded, they have another option to get home. So that's kind of why we run that 6:55 p.m. trip. We have made some adjustments to this route based on quite a number of requests. I believe it was for an earlier trip, right, Trevor?
It was the AM 621 trip. There was a considerable interest in moving it back about 10 minutes, I believe.
So we moved that back to meet, I think it was a shift change or a work schedule at Cornell. We got multiple.
A lot of that also was the Meadow Street businesses on the west end. 7:30 is admittedly a little bit early for Cornell, but where this came from is essentially the Route 20 is really nice insofar as there's only one trip where you combine all the commuters on, so it's kind of easy to find them, relatively speaking. And their perspective was, well, X, Y, and, they just name off the list of people who had been riding, who stopped riding around COVID when we cut back a lot of these trips. And said, well, they said they'd ride if we'd move it back a little bit. And there's also a lot of interest in folks who work on Meadow Street at the grocery stores and restaurants and so on, who walk down from the Agway stop on Meadow Street, and they would like an earlier trip to help with their shift schedules, and so that was where that came from.
So, we do get a lot of questions sometimes about, why is service so focused in the urban core? And a lot of it has to do with basic economics. As public transit, you have to cover more distance and you're carrying fewer riders, the cost per passenger goes up considerably. So just a comparison kind of on the cost per passengers on our urban routes versus our rural routes. Our urban routes, the most productive ones generally sit under $5 per ride. That means that, essentially how much it costs TCAT to move that person for the trip. And with the rural routes, they can start around $20 a ride and climb into the 30s. We had an outlier, which was the 77, which was very high. That route was absorbed by the 31. But in general, there is a major cost issue with rural service. It's very expensive. There is not a dedicated funding stream really to provide rural service. And this is a problem that a lot of transit systems in our part of the state are dealing with. So with that, we'll kind of go into finances.
I just want to say that's kind of a startling number to see these costs. Something I've never seen before, so thank you for.
Yes, this is we provide, it's a public service, so we don't expect every route to have excellent financial performance, and we understand that when we serve these rural communities, we serve them out of social need, not fiscal convenience. But it does bring up the problem, as we struggle with fully funding all of our operating costs. And there's more and more demand for rural service. Who funds that? That's kind of the big problem. And this is, you see this not just all over New York, but in the rest of the country as well. But yes, it becomes very expensive to provide transit service the lower the population density is.
I'm guessing that a lot of that is just because there aren't very many people on the buses going out to these areas. Like if you got, twice as many people to use these buses, the cost would drop significantly.
Yes, as ridership improves, the cost drops. We really have, we have a handful of rural trips that probably have very low ridership, but I would say in general, our rural routes do perform okay ridership-wise. But, you also get into issues, the mileage. you're running a lot of miles, and that, consume a lot of fuel, wear and tear in the vehicle, more labor to operate the vehicle. And obviously, when you're having fewer passengers per mile, that also drives up the cost. So this is a snapshot of where we sit with our current budget. We are currently running $1.2 million over budget. That was due to a larger than expected STOA payment. STOA, we'll get a little bit into that later, is the state funding that is like the lion's share of our operating funding. And they do something called a cleanup payment, which basically assesses TCAT's performance relative to the other STOA formula recipients in the state. And because we outperformed the other STOA formula recipients, we received a much larger than anticipated STOA payment. Overall, the big concern, and this is April of 2026, but the big concern right now is fuel costs. We obviously didn't budget for the fuel costs being as high as they are. We also are paying high electricity costs to charge our electric vehicles. Electric buses have a lot of advantages, but they still, do require quite a bit of money to pay for the propulsion. But overall, we're tracking pretty well within our budget, and fuel is the one area we're concerned about, through the rest of the year. So we'll get a little bit into some of the challenges that we're facing. I talked a little bit about STOA. So STOA is 36% of our revenue. We have a little over $20 million budget. STOA is our bread and butter. That's really important to us. The STOA is now coming primarily out of the state general fund. The dedicated funding sources for STOA are a petroleum business tax and a long distance telephone tax. Those are both kind of outdated. So the concern is that, the state budget's grown considerably over the last 15 years while the population is more or less not growing. So the concern is that without a dedicated funding source to STOA, this funding may be in jeopardy in the future. And this is a critical program for TCAT and all the transit operators in upstate New York. Other sources, this includes the underwriter's share, the Cornell service level agreement, fair revenue, advertising revenue. I'm sorry, underwriter's share in the green, but this includes fair revenue, the Cornell service level agreement, that pays about another 32%. Underwriter's shares are about 19% of the budget, and federal and state assistance from other programs sits around 13%. So the other problem with STOA, aside from the fact that it's the funding for it is somewhat unstable, is there's a disparity between how much you get paid per ride, which is 68 cents per ride, and how much you get paid per mile. We get paid $1.15 per mile. That really hurts TCAT, and it hurts TCAT disproportionately to many other transit systems because we're so busy. TCAT does a tremendous amount of rides for a transit system our size, for a community our size. And mileage is not a great way to kind of assess transit because we have some routes that may have an average speed of 3 or 4 miles an hour, but carry 60 passengers in that hour. We have other routes that may have an average speed of 40 miles an hour and, don't carry as many passengers. So one of the challenges here is we'd like to see that disparity between the ridership rate and the mileage rate closed a little bit. Nice thought, it kind of agrees with that. They're looking at options that they can do, but the current STOA formula does put TCAT at a disadvantage. Additionally, there's lots of money for capital funding, buying new buses, facility projects. There's not a lot of operating funding available right now, and that is the challenge with transit, is everyone likes to buy things, to build things. It's the sustained operating funding that's always the problem. So again, finding operating sources, especially as operating costs are continuing to rise, is one of the big challenges. I mentioned a little bit about costs. Even before the problems in the Middle East, we were seeing parts problems crop up again. Not really sure what the source of this has been, but there's been both shortages and longer lead times, higher prices to get parts. Obviously, we're going through an energy crisis right now. Diesel fuel's gotten very expensive. We've actually been fairly fortunate because we're paying much lower rates than what I found other, institutional buyers of diesel fuel are paying, but it's still much higher than we budgeted. And then still dealing with fallout from the tariffs. Transit is an international, it's a global industry. Vehicle manufacturing of transit components, which are fairly complicated, engines, transmissions. An engine might cross the border 3 to 5 times before it's completed. It goes from city to city, getting a different step of the engine production. And the tariffs really created tremendous chaos in both procuring new vehicles and procuring parts. And we're still dealing with the elevated prices and some of the shortages. Prices are very quick to rise when there's turmoil, and they're very slow to fall. Our facility, is a challenge. So our facility was built in 1993. There's kind of 2 big problems with the facility. One is that, the infrastructure of the facility is all aging at the same time. We have a leaking roof, a pitted floor, half of our maintenance lifts are not working. The other problem is that the facility itself was built for a transit system much smaller than TCAT is. So we should have twice as many maintenance bays as we have. That leads to a backlog in getting vehicles fixed and put back on the road. In the summer, it's not as bad. We can do a lot of work outside. In the winter, when we have a lot of maintenance problems and breakdowns due to the cold, you can't really do as much work outside. So the facility is undersized. We don't have enough storage space for all of our vehicles. Also, it's not a good candidate for a decarbonized fleet. Electricity availability is problematic. The soil it's on is not great, so future facility expansions are problematic, and it's hemmed in. So the facility, I know I see some members nodding. I know this has been a past conversation that's come up a little bit. We're in the process of kind of revisiting the future of the facility and what we want to do with it. So the options are, and this was the pre-COVID option, was start fresh, build a new facility. Costs have roughly doubled since before the pandemic for construction. There's some good areas near the airport, I think, where you have good electricity availability, good soil, and it's not too far that it would cause operational problems. That would probably be the area we're looking in. But this is very costly, and local match is a problem. All of our underwriters are under some fiscal pressure. The lowest risk and the best ROI would be to expand the existing facility. The problem is we're hemmed in by Guthrie on one side, DPW, and the golf course. So, and the existing site is in a flood zone, and parts of it there's 2 types of flood zones, and I'm not well versed in the flood zones, but one FTA will allow investment in, the other they will not. Most of our facility is good. There's a few areas where FTA would probably not want to see additional investment. And the third option, which has been really successfully implemented by a number of transit systems, is actually repurposing a building, finding another large building and repurposing it. The big problem in Tompkins County with this approach is that there was never a lot of heavy manufacturing in this area, so there's not a lot of good candidate structures. But this is a good way that kind of keep costs lower without as much risk as starting fresh with a new facility. Also, there's the issue of authority status. So TCAT was founded in 1996. It was kind of a joint venture between the city, TomTran, which was the county public transit system, and Cornell University. And the idea was each party would pool their resources together. It drove costs down. It offered federal and state funding options for campus transportation. And, the joint venture kind of lasted until roughly, I think, around 2005, at which point TCAT, it became evident that we had to have a different structure. The state regulators were not thrilled about the joint venture. The joint venture was essentially a brand. It didn't employ anyone. There was a lack of accountability. There were safety concerns. So in 2005, there was a push to become a local authority. There was some infighting among the labor unions as to which labor union would represent the authority employees, and ultimately that led to it stalling in Albany and failing. It came very close. It made it to second reading. And since then, the authority issue has largely remained unvisited. The reason that the authority issue is coming up again now is TCAT, we don't have any ways to generate our own local funds. We have to come to the county, the city, and Cornell and say our costs are up. We need you guys to either pay more out of the levy or for Cornell, figure it out, where the money comes from. And that's a tall ask every year. It also is somewhat unsustainable. It's very, transit is something that excels when you can do long-term multi-year planning. We don't really know what our budget's gonna be every year. So that kind of process of coming to the underwriters every year and seeing what the funding will be is disruptive to long-term planning and long-term efficiencies. So I know there's been a lot of conversation locally about what it would mean to become a local authority. There's two types of sort of transit authorities in the state. You have your large authorities like Buffalo, Rochester, Albany, Syracuse. These are essentially arms of the state government. They have boards that report to the governor. These are the ones we're familiar with, but not all transit authorities function this way. For a long time, there was the Ithaca Transit Authority, which was a local authority. Your boards are appointed by local entities, and there's a lot more local control than a state authority would have. A good example locally would be the Ithaca Housing Authority. These are, again, locally controlled, but independent and can raise their own revenues so that they're not having to essentially come to the funders every year. The big benefits, like I mentioned, are the independent revenue streams. No need to come to the underwriters every year and say we need money to pay for our local match, to pay for our operating costs. There's also some administrative and regulatory benefits. We are currently viewed by DOT like they would view a charter bus company, so our vehicles have to go through DOT inspections twice a year. We maintain our vehicles to pretty high standard, but it is disruptive having to pull 5 or 6 vehicles off the road, at a time to go through a DOT inspection. So that's all I had. I know I went through that really quickly. It was a lot of information, so I'm happy to revisit any point of it.
Good. Matthew, thank you. I apologize for kind of putting you in a position where you had to rush through it a little bit. Just 2 points come to mind, somewhat. One is I can remember in a different capacity in 1992 working with Senator D'Amato to get the earmark to get the facility built, and it's like, oh my God, that's almost 35 years ago. So I'm aging myself here. But it was, at the time, considered quite a facility for what was being provided. And related to that is I know that we had a lot of discussions over the past few years about developing more of a transportation hub in the Warren Road area, airport complex, and kind of made a baby step toward that with getting the DOT up into the neighborhood, and we are looking at some other plans that are related. The fuel facility has been built, and you're going to see some capital projects at the airport, so it may be good to re-engage that. And there was a desire among previous legislators to see that waterfront area incorporated into some of the city's development plans over a period of time. So timing-wise, that may be good. The second thing is that we do have a couple of legislators that serve on the TCAT board, Deborah Dawson and Shauna, I believe. I don't know if there's a third one now. Laura Lewis filled in a spot that was previously held by one of our legislators, but we would be looking to those legislators to give us some guidance on the long-term viability or funding mechanisms. I just would caution you that that's a tough conversation because understand it's a challenge each year for you to go to the 3 partners to get the increases. But I think one of the concerns is always going to be, coming from some of our legislators, is that they would want to make sure in any scenario moving forward that the strong component that is Cornell University remains part of that, and it doesn't just necessarily shift back to the overall taxpayers' funding. And also, you know, kind of related to that is that I know that a lot of the county share is covered under our mortgage tax and how we apportion that. So that's a long-term sensitive conversation because it really does affect the dynamics of the overall county budgeting process. But we appreciate you putting that forward and in the context of how it makes it a challenge for you on an ongoing basis to be able to plan for the sustainability of the organization.
Yes, and I think, and Frank can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the county mortgage recording tax is actually in addition to the county's share. It mimics essentially some revenue streams that the larger authorities have access to through their mortgage recording tax. And of course, the county does administratively support TCAT through Frank and his team, and there is a cost to that as well. So the county certainly does provide, you know, funding and resources that make it possible to run TCAT. I can't talk too much in detail about this because negotiations are ongoing, but you know, we have presented a proposal to Cornell that I think offers them more opportunities to open TCAT up to their campus communities while also addressing the issue of the fact that all of the service that we provide Cornell is not properly funded. So we're trying to really ensure that, you know, the service we're providing to the public is balanced, and that anything in addition to you know, a more basic level of service does have a reliable funding stream from the party that essentially is using it. So we're working on that internally, and hopefully over the next few months, you know, we'll be able to speak more publicly as we reach an agreement.
Appreciate that. Judith.
Thank you. I learned a lot from your presentation. Interested in this discussion of authority status. I know I've had conversations with some different legislators about this as one possible direction for TCAT, so it's nice to see it here. My question is about the special taxing districts. Like, how does that mean you just like apply an additional tax to everybody in the county essentially, and then we no longer would have the underwriter status funding? And are tax exempt organizations exempted from that kind of a tax, or is it really applied to everybody?
So I'm not an expert. I would assume tax exempt organizations would be exempt, but I'm not an expert.
That would be Cornell, which currently is an underwriter, right? So I think that's where one of these questions really arises.
I think, you know, if TCAT were to transition to a local authority, you know, the relationship with Cornell would, I mean, it would depend on whether or not Cornell would sit on the board of that local authority and how that local authority was structured. And there's a lot of complex legal issues that I can't answer because, you know, we're in the beginning of kind of doing research into this. But I think in general, you know, how I would like to explain it is, you know, we kind of have 3 different relationships with Cornell. There's the relationship with Cornell, that Cornell sits on our board. There's the relationship with Cornell as an underwriter. And then there's the relationship with Cornell is essentially a customer of TCAT. And the relationship with Cornell as a customer of TCAT is where essentially funding the service we provide them, that's the relationship where that takes place. And I'm sorry, I know you had another question. I didn't.
No, I think my main question, my main point is I'd be very hesitant to go into a system with special taxation districts if non-tax exempt institutions are exempted. I think like that just doesn't seem like something anybody would want to go.
Yeah, I think Judith is really helping let you know that where the starter and no starters are, and so you've got
to come from somewhere else.
some groundwork to do to bring that conversation forward.
I think the intent would certainly not be to do what you're concerned about. The intent would be to provide more sustainable funding for our operations, but also capture the Cornell funding mainly in that customer TCAT relationship as opposed to, kind of the way it sits now, where we have a large amount of Cornell service that's not adequately funded, which essentially ends up being socialized among the 3 underwriters.
Right. I mean, in general, I've heard very good things about authority status. I would just want to make sure that we understand all the implications.
And I think that's something, we can visit more in the future as we do more research. We're really kind of getting our feet into the water here. So I would welcome, a follow-up conversation that would go a little deeper into that area. And we are just starting some internal research with, our on-call planning consultant to help us kind of work through a lot of those structural issues.
Daryl Tuttle's got a hand raised, our county finance officer, and I recognize him. We've got to wrap this up here fairly soon, but hi, Daryl.
Hi, I'll be quick. I won't go into the weeds, but I think one layer to add to this, and I'll let them do the research, and there's a lot of research to be done, but currently the way TCAT is structured, they cannot access grants on their own. It has to happen through us. So, and that actually is, so in addition to Frank's staff and county administration, it takes up my staff as well, because we have to review and we actually do the draws ourselves. So there's that layer that if they were to go to an authority, and I won't speak I'll speak in a broad and a general sense, I believe that gives them a little more authority to do grants on their own, but that's something to look into.
Yes, and as I said earlier, I just want to acknowledge, the county provides a lot of support to TCAT, grants administration, oversight, compliance, and there's a lot of staff time from multiple county departments that go into supporting TCAT. And we're very grateful for that, but it is a burden on the county, there's no question.
John.
I just have a short ridership point of view question. I lived in Fort Collins for about a decade after being here in Ithaca. I've always been a bus rider myself, and I was on the advisory committee as a representative at one time. But they have an app on cell phones out there that allows a rider at a bus stop to see where routes are located. So for instance, did the bus just leave here 5 minutes ago, or is it on its way? And I've heard that the buses already have sort of some kind of locator or GPS thing attached to them. Is somebody working on developing something like that?
So we do have an app currently. The app is called MyStop. It's by Avail Technologies, and you would essentially download the app and then select TCAT from a list of transit systems. We have pretty good performance out of the app. 2 years ago, I think a number of vehicles were probably not reporting. Now, virtually all the vehicles in service report to the app. It has detours, cancellations, up-to-date service announcements. But we're looking to make it even better, So I would encourage you to experiment with it, but
I'll look at it. The app out there will let you see a map of the route. So you can see there's a dot on the map. This is where it is right now.
Yep, ours works the same way, and we recently added passenger count, so you can see how crowded a vehicle is, whether it's full or not. But the interface, I think, is a little bit clunky. So we're certainly going to look at options with our technology project to make it more customer friendly.
Thank you.
Randy.
I'll finish up. So thank you for their presentation. I really like the budget year to date versus your budget actual. I like that kind of data. It's very current. I do have questions, but I'm not going to ask them now. But I did take a tour when you first got here, and I'd like to do that again. Maybe you could invite other legislators down to kind of give a view of where things are at, what you're thinking. So.
Absolutely. We would love to have the legislature down for a tour. You could see some of the challenges we're dealing with in person, as well as some of the things we're excited about. So I will work with, I think, Katrina on scheduling that, but we would welcome that. We'd love to have people at the facility.
And hopefully get a new kitchen soon.
Yes.
Dan.
Yeah, I likewise will be very quick. I've got several questions, but I need about this much depth, okay? Number one, thank you, very informative presentation. I learned a ton. Also, thank you when your example here on Route 20 in Enfield, your adjustment shows real attention to the community needs and what's going on in terms of shifts changes, okay, for labor. at a very high level, you mentioned articulated buses. I question whether or not the resources needed to support that is going to be worth the bang for the buck. I'm just going to drop that and keep going. I noted on your budget, and I'm a real kind of percentages guy here. Is it really true, based on my calculation here, that fares are only 4.2% of your budget? So it really costs a rider 25 times what they're paying.
That's correct with passenger fares. Now, I would say the way the federal government looks at it is they would calculate the Cornell agreement as fare revenue because it's essentially a bulk fare agreement. But yeah, you know, I would say that sounds about right. Okay. Most public transit systems, you know, the number's under about 10%. Okay. That's, you know, a decision that, you know, policy decision, we kind of like to keep fares low to keep public transit accessible and recover revenue from other sources.
And finally, my eyes kind of glazed over at the complexity of the knot that the authority status brings up. I am not even going to pretend to wrap my brain around it. That will need to be tackled at some point.
Yes, we'll be happy to have a conversation about that in the future with more details. Probably, I think in the fall, we'll be in a lot better position to answer some of those questions.
Thank you. Matthew, thanks. Appreciate your presentation. It's a lot of information, good information, and I think it's started to move in a direction that some of the legislators were hopeful to see that data in previous discussions.
Thank you.
How long have you been with us now? 2.5
years. So, yeah, we've gotten a lot accomplished. A lot of challenges remain ahead, but you know, I think we're moving the needle in the right direction.
You couldn't have come in at a more challenging time.
Well, that's kind of the fun in it, because I think when, you know, you reach a point where there are a lot of challenges, it's much easier to implement positive changes.
Good perspective. Thanks. We had a couple of budget adjustments for weights and measures. I don't know that there were any, would be any questions on those for informational items. I don't have anything further today. Looking quick around. If in that case, there being no further business before this committee, we'll adjourn. Thanks all.